Now, I'm specifically talking about the RVOT stent in the infant and not the RVOT stent in preparation for a transcatheter valve. So this is infant. So basically, in the primary congenital disease, we're mostly talking about the tetralogy flow and the pulmonary atresias after you've perforated the valve. This applies to those where the surgeons feel, or we feel that the valve cannot be spared, right? Of course, if you can spare it, you'd rather not stent across the valve. The goal is to provide adequate pulmonary flow until the surgeons do their repair, either with a transcatheter, a transannular patch, or RB to PA conduit. So these are the two anatomies that I'm going to mostly focus on. Complications are associated with either the patient as being small, so they're an intrinsic complication just because the baby is small, complex anatomy, a dynamic right ventricle outflow tract, growth of the RVOT muscle bundles and the pulmonary arteries. Acute complications would be stent malposition and migration. That's focused on the operators. Small compliant RVOT tracts and variable infundibular geometry that makes the stent anchoring difficult. Migration can occur towards the MPA or back into the RV, so leading to acute obstruction or embolization, right? Arrhythmias is a risk. The mechanical irritation of the outflow tract can trigger a ventricular tachycardia, premature beats, and heart blocks, etc. There is increase in infants with pre-existing hypertrophy infundibular myocardium. You notice that when, especially for the pulmonary valves that you perforated in a balloon, the valve is open and suddenly there is a much worse dynamic obstruction in the outflow tract. Acute complications can include perforation and tamponade, especially at the edge of the stents, as applies to an angle, for example. So again, aggressive balloon expansion could rupture the infundibulum or tear it, or in the MPA. So that can cause effusions of all kinds, either in the heart, in the pericardium, or in the pleural space. It's particularly dangerous for those patients with very fragile RV falls, the young ones and the small ones. Hypoxia during procedure is an issue, and oftentimes we are working faster because they desaturate as you run your wire through. So balloon occlusion of the, or transient outflow of the obstruction can cause profound desaturations. So we have to get ready to treat that. We know that when we inflate the balloon, the saturation is going to be fine for a few beats. And then even after you deflate the balloon, then you see the desaturation. So you can anticipate that this is going to happen after the lung has emptied the blood, and then it's empty. And then, of course, it takes time for the heartbeat to refill it, to go back to normal. So those are the times where you have to pay attention. Inadequate coverage of the OT obstruction is another complication, right? So I'm mostly going to focus on the procedural complications. Of course, there's also post-operative complications, including in-stent thrombosis. Again, these are small vessels, caliber stents. You can get acute thrombosis. And so, of course, we have to think hard about anticoagulation or antiplatelet therapies right afterwards. Restenosis is an issue due to intimal hyperplasia in the stent, or the stent is not expanded adequately, or there's recoil from the dynamic muscle tissues. It can occur weeks to months, necessitating a repeat intervention. And we just have to have a low threshold to bring these kids back to the cath lab to see what's going on. And more than likely, you will have to further dilate or add additional stents. There's also post-procedural complications include that when you put a stent in, it's too big, you can actually create some pulmonary overcirculation and right heart failure, right? So that's just part of making measurements and making sure you understand what size stent you want to put in for that size baby. Endocarditis infection can be a risk because you have a foreign body sitting there and there is obviously residual lesions there. There's turbulence in that RVOT with the high pressure and dilation with foreign material. So again, endocarditis can be particularly risky in the cyanoid infant, and most of these patients have that. Late complications, and when I mean late, I mean that you're trying to wait and buy time for the surgeons to operate, so therefore the baby's going to grow, and you want them to grow, but as they grow, it can outgrow the size of the stent, and you might have to go back and further dilate, right? So these are metal, and it's fixed restrictions, and we always make sure the parents know that we may have to bring them back to accommodate the somatic growth. Again, just anticipate that you will have serial redilations, and of course the surgeons have to remove that stent later on. And these could be surgical complications that they'll blame on you for that. You can distort the PAs as well, right, with the stenting. So a malalignment, oversizing can distort the MPA and complicate the surgical repair. Late complications, like I said, can occur interfering with the surgeons. Some surgeons don't mind it. Luckily, my surgeon don't mind it, but I know that in some centers in the US, the surgeons hate it. So anyways, these are the things that you have to think about when you make this plan. And of course, it's going to require the stent to be excised, and then of course the transannular patch modifications, or you're going to be big enough to put a conduit in. Aneurysmal formation can happen, especially when the RVOT thins out, and you have to be aware of that. You can have a pseudoaneurysm or actually a true aneurysm. And let's just talk about how do we avoid some of this. First thing is careful imaging, right? I always talk about when you take an angiogram, don't look at the frame that gives you the best contrast. Look at the frame where it's the maximal diameter, because when you undersize it, the stent have a risk of embolizing. So that size is really, really important. We tend to use the pre-mounted stents, either in the coronary size or the small renal size, and I'll go over that later on. Anticoagulation afterwards, either you're going to be very aggressive with heparin, followed by Lovenox, so you're going to use antiplatelet therapy with a combination of aspirin and Plavix to reduce that thrombotic risk. And again, these patients need to be monitored very closely. Oftentimes in our center, we put them in the same category as the interstage hypoplast. We monitor them every week to make sure that at least they're doing well and growing. And so they don't have to necessarily come into the clinic, but we have our nurses calling them once a week to check on everything. And they have daily records that we track. So again, close monitoring is really important. All right, so how do you get across the RVOT? One of the things I find that sometimes whatever we have available is not always perfect for the curves. We know that the tetralogy tend to have a very horizontal RVOT, so that makes the curve much more difficult. It's a bigger turn. So knowing that, we can actually learn how to make the curves. And this is old school. I learned this from my mentor, Dr. Mullins. Either you put it in the hot bath, and then you wrap it around the clamp, and then you can actually improve the curve. This isn't a JR catheter. You can see that changes. And this curve can help you get around the outflow tract and get the wire in the right position. Otherwise, the wire goes superiorly, and you can actually perforate that way. So you got to pay attention to that. You can also use this other technique. This is an angle glide catheter. It's a hydrophilic catheter. When I put a curve there with a wire, I heat it up with a heat gun, like that, and then as soon as your finger starts to burn, you stick it in the water. So this is usually a fellow's job, but sometimes I give them a break. So therefore, you cool it down, and then this is what it looks like afterwards. You just see the standard curve versus the heat curve, and this can be very helpful in getting the right angles. Oops, what happened here? So you can also have these microcatheters that have angles. These are the supercross microcatheters that come in 90 and 120 degrees. So therefore, you can put them coaxially to get the turn you want if you don't want a heat curve. So this is a soft wire through the microcatheter supercross, through the angle glide catheter. You can see how you can improve the curves with that. So infundibulum stenosis, I think one of the key things you have to pay attention is the angle that changes when the wire crosses the outflow tract. So you got to pay attention to the native angle before you actually put the wire in, so you can remember what the angle looks like. I talked about the poor man's image overlay, and this can be helpful because you draw that before the wire for the positioning purposes. So I'll give you an example of this. So here's the outflow tract on lateral and AP. You see where you're going to have to make sure the stent crosses that, right? So you take this picture and you see this image, you say, okay, I know that once the wire is out, this is going to be the position of the stent because of that natural anatomy. So again, same picture, you look at systole and diastole, you notice that changes, right? So you're going to have to pay attention to both systole and diastole as you put the stent in. So here's an example of a patient that we put the stent in with the wire in, and notice what happens that when the wires are removed. suddenly the stent shifts because it's going to want to go back to the native angle. But look at the infundibulum, the muscle bundle. With the wire in, it looks like it's perfectly fine. Once you take it out, now you notice that it's sitting above the curve of that infundibular, that muscle there. So you know that this is going to come back and haunt you, right? It's going to come back. So pay attention to what it looks like before you put the wire in and note that angle. And so when you put your stent in, anticipate the native angle. So envision what it's going to look like, and don't just base it on the angle with the wire that's in place. So here's a good example where we have a stent in place, and this is the shape of the stent that is in with the wire in. Again, with it out, this is how it change. See how the stents will tend to shift back to its native anatomy angle, and you got to be careful that the outflow tract is not. The muscle bundle does not go underneath that stent, and then you're going to have to bring them back. So in fact, if you see that, you might as well just put another stent in. So here's a 34-week preemie patient who also happened to have omphalocele, 2.1 kilos, 2.2 kilos, and you see tight stenosis, slight infundibulum, noted native angle of that outflow tract. And so that's what it looks like. And we put the stent in, and it actually looks pretty good, except if you slow down the pictures, you'll see this indentation on both of them. Again, that's going to haunt you. So when you see that, don't just say we're good enough, just put another stent in and go lower than you need because you don't want to have to bring them back because the kid is desaturated. So just pay attention to that. So this is the pre and this is the post. Get familiar with what's available in the pre-mounted stents. For the neonates, I tend to use the Megatron stent. I think that many people are familiar with that now. It's a coronary system, but it's the largest diameter that's available in the coronary system, and it goes through a 4 French delivery system. So again, we can either have the types of coronary stents that are over the wire or rapid exchange. Then you have the next category, sort of like the Palmaz Blue or the Herculean stents. These go through a 5 French system. It can go as big as 8 millimeters, depending on the size you want the baby or how long you want to wait until the surgeon wants to operate. So these are the considerations, but it goes through a 5 instead of a 4. And then in some older patients, older meaning 1 month, 2 months or so, the Genesis pre-mounted stents go through over a 3-5 wire, 6 or 7 French system, depending on the size you want. So here's an example of the Megatron stent. If you look at it, you can see that this is mounted on a 5 millimeter balloon, and you can see how that if you overinflate it above the rated pressure, it can actually get to 5.6 or so. But if you look at this category, in the small print right there, it can actually go up to 6 millimeters. So it's a really good one to use in an RVO stent, especially if you're anticipating that you want the baby larger before surgical repair. There's another stent that I didn't put in here that can go up to 5.75, and the name escapes me now, but I tend to use the Megatron. Here's the Blue Max Palmaz Blue stent, and it goes through, like I said, a 5 French system and a 1/8 wire. The Herculeans goes to a 5.26. Again, they're a little larger, they're all pre-mounted, and so if you have these stents available, it's really, really helpful. TET spells can happen during the middle of the procedure, right? So definitely you have your PGE around if there's the ductus already, volume, the typical maneuvers to increase systemic resistance like putting ephedrine on, epinephrine or so forth. And sometimes you're gonna have to do this urgently or emergently, right? Because they're spelling on you. And again, I think that hybrid procedure can be a good way to do it, especially if you have a surgeon who's willing to work with you. And then, of course, in some certain cases, just make sure you have some ECMO backup so that you don't get too far into trouble. Here's a newborn with a TET spell. You can see how tight that infundibulum is. But it's interesting that every time I've had the situation, and once I put my wire in there, the catheter stiffness is enough to actually prevent the spasm. So you notice that I haven't done anything here, but you notice that the catheter itself has helped to relieve that spasm. And that's happened to me multiple times, that even if I see the spasm, I know that I can try to avoid it by just putting a catheter tip in that infundibulum. And of course, then we have stented it. And sometimes it's not so easy to make that curve. Remember, sometimes it's very tortuous. And I learned to use that, oops, I'm gonna go back. You learn to use the right atrial dome where you put the curve of the sheath above so that it prevents it from buckling back. Just by having this extra curve, the catheter will then continue to go forward. So learn to use the domes of the atrium in these very tight turns. So that's the obstruction, and then this is what it looks like after the catheter was put right next to it, and then that's the stent there. Again, we expanded the Megatron stent here, and again, using the dome can be very helpful to prevent it from backing out as well. Sometimes you get this sort of watermelon seating because you don't have that. By keeping that curve in the dome, it prevents the catheter from slipping back. And I found that to be very helpful to maintain stability of the stent. Again, you notice this one, there's a little bit of infundibulum still sitting underneath, and it's really important just to, don't say that it's good enough, put a second stent in and make sure you get to cover all that muscle. So I always err on the side of having the stent too low than too high. 2-month-old admitted for RSV. Of course, it was fine until he developed RSV. The surgeon didn't want to operate right away, but he's bigger and older now, right? So therefore, you can see how we actually ballooned it and stented. So we put in this one is because it's an older patient, we used a pre-mounted Genesis that goes over a 6 French system. And you can see that you can actually get that in place. And then the patient went for repair 6 weeks after the RSV infection. 1.9 premium. Sometimes you're doing this to try to grow the pulmonary arteries. So hypoplastic outflow tract, nobody wants to operate on a kid like this. So if you put a stent in there, you can see how the one stent is in. Let me just get to that part. And then you see how that's what it looks like afterwards. When you bring them back, you notice the vessels have grown a bit. And you can do this and to buy time for the baby to mature and get bigger, and you can grow the pulmonary arteries using the RVOT. In this case, there was a LPA stenosis. We ended up adding another stent there. So we've gone up, and then at some point, he went and had his operation. So allow that to time to grow. So let's see here, 34-week, I think we showed that. Of course, the same patient I showed earlier where we had to add an additional stent, 2 months later comes the saturated, and you can see how there is intima growth in there. So again, this is the things that you have to pay attention as a late complication for this. But anticipate it. Make sure you tell the family that that might happen. Tell your surgeon so they don't blame on you for inadequate intervention. So everybody knows that this could happen, especially depending on how long you don't want to wait for surgery. And so, of course, it's pretty straightforward. At this point, you put an additional stent in, and you open everything back up. So let me just summarize that the RVOT stent can be implanted safely and effectively. There are techniques to cross tight RVOT curves. You can heat the curves, catheters, and even the sheaths to get around these tight curves. Pay attention to the native angle in the outflow tract before you stent. Beware of inadequate coverage of muscles in the infundibulum. Get familiar with what's available in the pre-mounted system. As I said, the Megatrons, the Palmaz Blues, the Herculinks, and then the pre-mounted Genesis. You may have other stents available outside of the United States because our FDA is pretty strict. The RVOT and plus minus PDA stent can maintain pulmonary flow to prevent TET spells, to allow time for infections to clear before surgery, to allow somatic growth to grow the pulmonary arteries, and they may require further dilation or additional stents over time due to intimal proliferation. Thank you for your attention.